Welcome along everybody. Today I'm going to show you how I made this card, which I've called Gathering the Harvest. What I'll do to save a bit of time is I'll list all the stamp sets from Cardio and the ink colours that I used underneath the video, and then that will just save us a bit of time. So I'll crack on now. I start with the Ivy stamp, and I'm going to take some Versacraft pine, and then what you want to do is give this a good stamp, because what I really want from this is a nice crisp image. So make sure that it's all covered nicely, and then with the smallest part of the top we're going to print here, because what I'm trying to make is like a semicircle shape. Look at that beautiful image. It's they do print really well, these stamps. So we repeat that process, again, cover it in Versacraft pine. Now Versacraft is a nice opaque ink, so you get a nice thick coverage there. And then I'm going to do one more for the moment with the Ivy. So we go in, and this time I'm just going to put it underneath there. So we're sort of taking this round in a semicircle shape. And then I'm going to move to my holly, and this I'm going to stamp in Versacraft Evergreen. Again, we want to give it a really good coverage of ink, and when you're doing very clear images at the front of your card that you want to be noticed, I suggest you use a nice new ink pad, which is nice and juicy. So because I'm looking for a curve, I want to print this one about here. So press down nice and firmly, and that's a lovely image, isn't it? So again, I'm going to do exactly the same thing as I did with the Ivy. I'm going to print again to bring it down into a semicircle shape. So underneath there, and then I'm going to go in over the top there. So we've got sort of like a basket shape, can you see? And then before I add the little bits, I'm going to stamp the raspberry bush. Now I found the best way to do this is I'm using Versacraft raspberry here appropriately, and then if we stamp the berries first, give them a good coating like that, and then go over the foliage, and I'm using the Versacraft pine again, because it's going to go next to the hollies, which are in the evergreen colour, so I wanted a bit of a contrast. So, and now you make sure there's quite a lot of detail in this stamp, so make sure you ink it really well, because really these three bits of foliage are the focus of the card. And then because I want that to hang over, I have to position this so the raspberries sort of hang over there. So I'm happy with that. I think we'll print it there, and then really give it a good press down and let the ink absorb into the paper a little bit, the card a little bit. And then hopefully we have a lovely clear image like that. Now, what I like to do is go in just to fill in the little gaps. Now, the way I do this is just to get the end of the stamp, dip it in to the ink, and then I can just add little bits of foliage here and there. If you're not confident with doing that, you can mask off this area. But I think you'll find if you are a little bit, if you're not very confident about it, just practice on a piece of old card or paper first. And then we can move these in a different way around. And also we want some going up into the other side, up into the holly as well, because we want to take the two colours together. I think we'll have a little bit coming out there, because, you know, nothing in nature is sort of uniform, is it? It's sort of random. You have a little bit sticking out here and there. So, and then we just take that right up into this raspberry bush, because we want to, you know, we don't want any sort of bare leaves or anything showing. I think that's probably enough. And we can then do the same with the holly. So again, I'm taking the tip of the holly pressing it into the evergreen this time, and then we can just add a little bit of... Now, if you notice in the original card, this bit here at the top, I overstamped a little bit darkly, but you'll find it doesn't matter. So if you think, oh gosh, I made a mistake there, don't worry. You know, it doesn't really matter. It's just go with it. Sometimes I thought, oh, you know, I've gone wrong on this card, I'm going to give up. But actually, if you persevere, they're sometimes the best cards. So, as you can see, we've now got the shape that we wanted, that sort of semicircle, which really frames our picture. And then we're going to put the little characters in. So, I want the big hedgehog, which is here, and I'm going to ink him up in pinecone around the back, and we're going to use quite a lot of ink for this because, in fact, I'm going to change my ink pad because that one's a little bit dry. We ink him up around the back because we want him to be prominent in this picture. And then I'm going to take a lighter colour, which is vanilla, in Versacolor, and then just do his body like that. And then we're going to position him sort of sitting in this well here. And then we need to press down hard. Again, give the card a little bit of time to absorb the ink. This is very good card, 350 GSM, which I always use. But if you've got a less porous card, you just hold it there a second. Because these are the characters that we want to be prominent in our card. It doesn't really matter so much if you're doing backgrounds. And then we've got the little fella. So again, we're going to do exactly the same thing. We're going to put the pine cone on his back, and then we're going to use a little bit of the vanilla on his body, and probably a little bit more on the younger hedgehog. And then we want him to be sitting up here somewhere behind. So I'm going to tuck him in here, I think. So we press that really hard. And you can see. Now, you can see there that there's a little bit of colour missing. Don't worry if that happens to you, because I'm going to show you what to do about that in a minute. So, as you can see, where I've stamped the extra foliage, there's a little bit of a gap here under the big hedgehog. So all you do, you know, take a look at it, you decide. Again, I'm going to just ink one of the ivy leaves and stick it underneath there. Do you see? So it looks like he's sitting, he's grounded. And then I'm going to add the other raspberries. And this is a really lovely little stamp. I've used the smallest in the Very Berry stamp for this. So again, these are going to be quite prominent. So we need a good ink up. And, you know, sometimes I do sort of secondary and third stamping. But I'm not going to with this one because I want it to be, every raspberry to be sort of quite prominent. So, and then what we do, you can just do this however you want to, like random little piles, because the idea is that the animals are gathering in the harvest to store. So, you know, wherever really you want them to go in your picture. And we can have the odd one or two in the actual foliage, because what's nice about that is it just picks out the colours that you're using. And then, believe it or not, that's also got a little cap. I don't know whether you can see that. So we're going to stamp that in the evergreen. And then you can see it just gently fits over the top. And we're going to just finish all those off. These clear acrylic box or the ones, the round ones are brilliant for this, because you can position them exactly where you want them to go, and it just gives that little bit of authenticity, doesn't it? You know, you could just pick it off the page and eat it. So now we're going to put our mice in, and I've chosen, I mean, Wendy's mice have just got so much character. It's really, you know, you don't really have to work this out because the little characters speak for themselves. So again, I want this to be quite prominent. So I'm going to stamp again, really quite a lot of ink in the pine cone. And then we're going to put him on this leaf here. So we're going to press that quite hard. Again, let the ink absorb into the card for a couple of seconds, and he's come out really well. And then I do the same on the other side. Don't forget, when you're working this out where you want them to go, that the way you're stamping the mouse isn't the way you're going to turn it over. So obviously that one's going to be facing that way. So I wanted one to stand on the top of the raspberry bush. So I've chosen one that faces this direction, and he's going to be balancing on here. So going to press that hard again, just holding it for a couple of seconds. He's up there. And if you look, this mouse here is on a secondary stamp, so it doesn't look like he's very grounded. So I'm just going to go in, again, like I showed you before, with my ivy, and just give him a little bit of more ground in there. And probably do that tip once more, like that. So it looks like he's actually standing on something. And then because they've got their arms out, we will put raspberries in. Well, why wouldn't you? So again, I'm going to stamp the raspberry, and then we're going to give him one there and the one up there. So that is the main body of your picture now. And the only other thing I would do to this would be to get a dry baby wipe and then take a little bit, I'm just going to tear off a piece of scrap paper, take a tiny little bit of the lime, Versacolor lime, onto your baby wipe. And I very rarely go straight onto the card with this, because you find that you get a big blodge of whatever colour you're using. So I always, and this is a technique that Wendy shows you again and again. Sorry, I'm move that card out of the way so you can see. You just rub it off onto a bit of scrap paper or card, so it's more subtle. And then I'm just going to fill in the gaps here. Now my ink is still going to be a bit wet, so I'm going to move some of this colour around, which is okay. But if you're a bit nervous about doing that, leave it to dry for a little while, and then you won't merge the colours. Now, you don't have to do this, but I think what you're trying to create is the sense that they're in a sort of holly and ivy sort of bush. So if you leave white gaps, it can affect the visual idea of that. So I just like to fill in, and then I'm just going to take a tiny little bit of the Versacraft pine, do exactly the same, rub it off onto a piece of paper, and then that big bit in the middle there. And in fact, when you look at that, that is quite a big gap there. So, and this is what you do afterwards. So what I'm saying is you can always go in and adjust these things to how you like. So I'm just going to add another little bit of ivy there. I'm going to put another piece there and a piece up there. And like that. Right, so that's the main body of our card. Then I told you that how to correct the hedgehog here, but I'm just going to leave that till last, and I'll explain why in a minute. Now we want to fill in the background. So to do this, I've cut just ordinary copy paper. I've cut shapes of sort of undulations. And so this is the way I do hills. This is the way that Wendy's shown you on many of her videos. So I'm going to place that one there. Again, I'm going to use the Versacraft lime for this, because I want it to be a very light green. I'm going to, you see, put it on my dry baby wipe. Again, I'm going to rub it off onto a scrap bit of paper, and then position this around there. And then we just work that in very gently around the animals and the berries. Now, again, if you're nervous about doing this, because you'll see a little bit of colour, because I'm stamping this newly, a little bit of the colour's lifting off onto there. But you can always mask off the mouse and the hedgehog if you don't want to do it like this. But what I'm going to do now is go in with the darker colour, the Versacraft pine. Again, rub off onto a piece of copy paper, and then go back down into the shading. So you've got that nice lime green underneath, and then you just put the pine colour in over the top. So it's going to look lighter than the pine colour around it. And then when you lift that, just go to the edge of there. So you see you've got the makings of a hill there. And then we're going to go the other way. So what we want is a hill in the other direction. So I've cut some more copy paper, and this time the hill is going to go like that. So we want it to sort of overlap there. So I'm just going to lift that up slightly. And again, we can go in with the VersaFine lime, just rub it off onto the copy paper like we did before, and then just gently rub that in. And I say, if you're nervous about the colours merging where you've pre-stamped the raspberries and things, let it dry for a little while or mask them off. It's entirely up to you. I mean, I used to do that, but frankly, you know, when you just want to get a card made, sometimes you just think, oh, I can't be bothered. I'm really, really impatient. I don't know about anyone else, but which is why I've got a bin full of scrap card and paper because I can't tell you the amount of times I've made mistakes. So there, you see, we have the two sort of shapes going either way. Now, if you just look at that landscape like that, it looks a little bit bare, doesn't it? So I always like to put in a bit of foliage in the background. And the way I do this, now when you cut this shape, you'll have a contrasting piece that matches it, which, you know, follows the undulations, you see. So what I do is use the opposite piece, mask off where my hill was there. Can you see that? And then I take, in this case, I'm going to take the Versacraft evergreen to start with. Now this is a lot darker, so make sure you rub this really well off onto your copy paper before you go straight to your card. And then I'm just going to make some random sort of, what would you call them, swirly shapes. And then a little bit more of the evergreen. Now you can see the difference in the inks here. This is the evergreen Versacolor, and it's a lot sort of thinner. The Versacraft is designed, you know, to be much more opaque that you can't see through, but this is ideal for this sort of building up layers technique. So you start with a thinner one first, and then we go in with the Versacraft pine. Again, just rub it off, and then that should build us a layer, but also it will cover the bottom of the evergreen. So you're now getting the idea of two different colour foliages in the bushes that we want to create. If I remove that, you can see how that's taking shape. And then I would actually just extend that up because I want it to give it a little bit of height. So now I've shown you the technique, I'm just going to carry on with that, keeping the paper in place. So I'm going up higher now, you can see, because this bush on this first hill is nearer to us. So obviously it's going to look bigger than the one that I'm going to put in behind it in a minute. And then I say we go in with the Versacraft pine. Now, you know, you don't have to be skillful to do this. Look, it's not skillful, is it? There's no real talent involved in this. So just be brave. Just go for it. Don't think you can't ever do anything, because I used to think that, and then I thought, I'll just have a go. You know, what have we got to lose, really? Nothing. So that's that hill, and then behind it, we're going to take the other stencil that I used, which was this one, and that should sit. If we get it right, that should sit perfectly. Now, I don't want these to be quite so big. And I've also got the hazard of the raspberry stick in there. So what I'm going to do is very gently go in with the Versacraft pine. I'm not going to use the darker colour this time because they're further away. So I want them to appear a little bit lighter. And then we just very carefully go round where we've already stamped. Now again, if you're nervous about this, just mask this off. I'll show you a little technique in a minute where you can sort of hide a multitude of scenes, but again, if you're much more patient crafter than me, I'm sure you'll take more time and trouble and mask it off and it'll look beautiful. So now this is a good tip. You can see there where I wasn't holding the mask directly to the hill, and it's quite important really just for the person looking at it. So we'll just move that down under a little bit and go in again just to create that line there. And then we just have a look at it, maybe a little bit more, and blend it in, those two greens in together. That's better. Now, well, that sort of looks like a bush laurel, you're telling me, but I found out how to do this just by pure accident, and I think it works for me. This is a very tiny tree from I think it's the Winter Tree Collection. So what I'm going to do is take it off, just hold it, get my VersaFine evergreen, stamp the very tips of it into the ink. Can you see? And then just put it in random places on the bush like that. Now, again, if you're nervous about going in straight away, you can just dab this off onto a bit and do secondary, and especially near the bottom. And then we'll also have them sort of randomly coming out the top, because this is a sort of autumnal type of scene, isn't it? So, you know, the foliage would have started sort of melting away a little bit. And don't worry if you get you know, bits, like you've got bits poking out there without greenery, because I'll show you in a minute. And then we do exactly the same with the second bush, only this time a little bit lighter, because again, it is further away, so you wouldn't see so much detail in that. And then we just do a tiny little bit there and in there. Right, so where it hasn't met up there, it's easily remedied. You just go back in with your colour and just go back over it. So you just got the suggestion of branches. Coming out every now and again. And then with a little bit of the evergreen in this one. So I always think that the bottom is where the darker colour is, so because the light doesn't get there so much, and it just gives it a little bit more depth. And then we go back up there to make that a bit of a more random shape. So that's the sort of body of your card, and then there's a few finishing touches. Now, when you look at this card, you can see that this ends there and my scenery ends there. So again, that's easily remedied, and I'm trying to make a few of these little errors because this is what happens to me when I'm making a card, and I'm sure it happens to you. So if I show you what I do, I don't think, oh God, I'll have to throw that away now, look, you know. You just think, oh, that's easy remedied because I'll just add a bit of green there. I'll go back to my ivy stamp, bring the ivy up to there, and then we'll put one in there. And that's remedied. So you've done it. Now, if that's spoiling the shape a little bit, then you can just work it out as you go along. You know, you think, well, I perhaps need to just counteract that by there, and then you get a better shape. But I say, it's, you know, it's your picture, so it's really up to you. And then the final details, and really you don't have to do this if you don't want to, but I do think this makes a lot of difference, and I've done it on my the card that I posted. So I take a fine liner, and this one is 003, so it's one of the finest. very, very gently, because we don't want any harsh lines, I just run it along the border. You can see I'm doing it intermittently. And then I'm going to just make it a little bit thicker here, which I'll show you why in a minute, and then up into the tree there. And then I'll get a paintbrush, quite fine, dip it in water, take a bit of kitchen roll, always take a bit of kitchen roll, never soak your paper, and then just blend that along. Like that. Can you see? That's just blending along that line. And then one more. And then we just dab it with the kitchen roll. And then just another little bit fine lining underneath. And again, if you see you've now got a line which you don't really want, so I take a little bit of the evergreen, the darker colour, and then just blend that around there a little bit over the top, and that just gives us a feeling that the you know, that's the darker point of the bush. And then we can just add a few little sprigs, almost like we did with the tree there coming up from the bottom. And then we don't need to do so much with this one because it's further away, so we're not going to blend this one. We're just going to put some random little horizon lines in like that. And again, I'm just going to put a little bit of the lighter colour, the Versacraft pine, over that. And there where I've got a little bit sticking out. And I'd also told you, do you remember going back to the hedgehog where we missed a little bit of his colour? Again, you just take the paintbrush, squidge a little bit of your vanilla colour onto your blending mat or whatever you're using, and then we take the paintbrush, dip it in water, but then gently dry it off, take a tiny little bit of that, and then just go in and fill in the gap. And if it's not quite dark enough, just go in again. Until you're happy that you think it's blended. And you know, all that just saves you throwing away a card because you've misstamped a little bit. If you wanted to do it darker, then you just take some of the pinecone colour, again, put it onto your mat, and then just blend the two together until you get a colour that you're happy with. Well, I think that's better, don't you? Yeah. And then we get rid of that because we don't want to get it on the back of the card. And then the other thing I'm going to do is just, again, with the 003 fine liner, just, I don't want to draw around these because you don't need to, because Wendy's done all that hard work for you. But I think just to make them stand out a little bit more sort of 3D, just where the light of the body, I just like to put, and I like to put a little bit of black on their noses. And also, I like to just go down one side of the ivy, not every piece, or the holly, and again, not every piece, but just putting in the odd black line just to make it a little bit 3D. And you don't need to blend that out or anything. You just, and you don't even need to do that if you don't want to, but I think it does, you don't think it would make a difference, but it does make quite a big difference. So I say you don't really have to do much of the work because Wendy's done it all for you. So really you're just highlighting her beautiful artwork. And I think we'll put one on there as well. So that's the body of the picture. I'm going to add a tiny little bit of sky in because I want the picture to come up a little bit. And for this I'm using, it's Atlantic blue. It's Versacolor, and this is my favourite blue for doing skies because although it looks pretty, you think, oh my God, that doesn't look like a sky colour. When you blend it down, it can be almost any blue you want it to be. So I take a little bit on my baby wipe, and I only want a tiny bit of sky for this, so I'm going to blend it really well off onto my copier paper. And then all we do is just, with the same swirling motion we used for the bushes, can you see? You just put in your sky. And I don't really want it to go too much above this arc line we've got here. I think that's enough, really. It's just to give that feeling of height on the card. And I'm going to add one more little piece of ivy because I want that really to come over the top there like that. And so basically that's the finished card. You can look at the card and you can see little errors, like the mouse here has got red on him. So again, with the painting technique I showed you before, you just get a little piece of the, a little dab of the pine cone and just go over his body. It doesn't matter if it's a different colour like that. And then we just dab it. You know, because you don't want to throw away a card you've worked really hard on for the sake of a silly error like that probably nobody would even notice. And then I've noticed the mouse on the raspberry tree, it looks a little bit like he's dangling in midair, doesn't he? So we'll just give him a little bit of ivy to ground himself a little bit better on, like that. Now the other thing, and lots of people ask about this on the Facebook page, what happens when you've finished your card and you're quite pleased with it and you think, oh, I really, you know, that's okay. And then this happens. Can you see? There's two big smudges here. There's a smudge there and there's a smudge there. Well, I can't tell you the amount of cards that suddenly have birds on them because I've got smudges in my sky. I'm honestly the world's messiest crafter. I can't tell you. But this is how I get rid of these little smudges like this. And you have to really do this when you've finished making your card, because once you've used this technique, it's quite hard to ink over it again because what you're doing is taking a little bit of layer of the paper off. So I've got a very, very fine graded sandpaper here, and I'm just going to rub it over the affected area. And you can see, look, you can see it's rubbing the surface of the paper off. And then I'll move down to that one. And then when I'm happy, I think, you know, and it doesn't have to be perfect. Don't try and make your card absolutely perfect because it's homemade at the end of the day. And then it's important that this is a clean baby wipe. Don't use one that you've used for inking. And then you brush off what you've sanded and then buff the paper to get a nice smooth finish, so anyone looking at it won't know that you've even done that. And there's a tiny little bit there. I'm just going to go in and get rid of that. And I notice at the top, I'm just going to turn my card around, there's another little bit there at the very top. Just go in with that and get rid of that. And that one there, I'm just going to make into a little bird, like that. And then take a look at your card and you think, is there anything else I could do? There's a little tiny smudge there, so I could go in again with the holly just to cover that up. I mean, I'm not really a perfectionist like this, but, you know, I know some people are. So if you are like that, then, and you don't want any of those smudgy bits showing, then just go and cover them up. That's the beauty of Wendy's stamps, is that they are absolutely so versatile. They allow you to make your own compositions, your own pictures. And, you know, that's why I love them, frankly. The last thing I'm going to do, because this is faithful to my original picture, I said this was an autumnal scene. So I'm just going to take a tiny little bit of the raspberry, rub it off again onto the copier paper, and then I'm just going to add it into the bush, because obviously I want it to look like the foliage is more autumnal. So we just add a little bit in that one and there. So I think I'm happy with that card. I think this is the original, and side by side, I think I'm happy with them both. And I'm sure any recipient you would send them to would be too. So happy crafting, everyone. I hope to have another video ready for you very soon. Thank you for watching.